You know, my mission is I want to pull ahead and see how bad that cylinder is. So, I have to back off the valves on this one so I can take off the head. I could probably put the air wrench on these, but sometimes it's better to just have the feel of what you're doing. Try to lay these out and keep them in order. I know that everything's going to get rebuilt, and it probably won't matter because things are going to get replaced. The lifters will probably be new, on and on, but if I can keep stuff in match set order, it's probably a better idea. Everything's been wearing together for the last 100,000 miles on this engine. It's always been my practice to try to keep stuff together so they could go back the same way. But so far the valley looks pretty good. The only thing I see bad looking down ports is that one there. Bigger glide easier. long breaker bar is a real treat though. Those are all loose. That one's quite loose. Well, not quite loose, but didn't have to put much into it. Same there. It's interesting that the ones inside the head, under the valve cover, have more tension on them to break, harder to break loose than on the outside. I'll just use the air wrench to run these guys out. Now that they're loose, I mean, I knew we'd have some different light bolts, but that's because that's a shorter drop on the end. Okay. And I got one here yet. One there I must have missed. Maybe I broke it loose, but just didn't turn it. Nope, didn't break it loose. All right. It's sitting in a pool of oil, I can say, and see it. Just also a little cautious about these engine stands. I've seen them tip over and have the engine bounce off the floor. They're not the most stable when you're supporting them by the back end, so when I put a lot of load on something, I tend to stand out of the way. Alright, that got it. That's the last bolt. And the short one, so it makes sense. So the short ones go on the end because the casting is shorter. safety's sake. Put a couple of these back in here just to keep it from dropping on the floor. Get a good look. All right. Over on the other side of the block. See this, try and get some light in here. See, this cylinder doesn't look too bad. It's got a little bit of grit in it, or carbon, but overall, it's still kind of got a mirror shine on it. And it's in not so bad shape. But if you look at the one next to it, this is the reason I pulled the engine. This is the reason the engine was really seized up and stuck. See all of the rusty stuff sitting on top of there? Pretty bad. Now the one next to it has a little bit of rust in the top of the cylinder, but for the most part it doesn't look too awful. But you know, not real pretty, but survivable. Get a little bit of light in there. But this guy, with all that rust, I'm going to try to crank that down now and see what that cylinder wall looks like. But that is the reason. You can see how much rust is sitting on top of the piston. I got at least that much, probably twice that much, came out of the spark plug hole into my pan as I was working on the engine earlier. So let's turn this over nice and easy. Let's see what we get. Set the camera down here for a minute. Alright, let's see if we can get a better look down there now that I put it down to the bottom. So if you come over to this one, you can see all that rust, all that built up. You can kind of see on the wall, see if I get a right spot, you can see a pattern there where it looks like water may have been sitting in that cylinder, filling it. You see that water line kind of right in the middle of the picture, and you see it on both sides. You can like I say, it looks as though it was sitting there rusting. I have no idea how much material we lost off the walls. When I get a chance, I may have to see if I can get a bore diameter, but I don't really have a mic that size. Maybe a moot point. The good thing is, just looking at it, it doesn't look as bad as I would have guessed. And perhaps an overbore, maybe it won't need a sleeve. So anyway, I'm going to take a couple of still photos and then try to clean that up a little bit and get a better look. Now, the next thing to take a look at is the valve. Here's the combustion chamber for that cylinder. You can see that rusty stuff on top of it. And I could see rusty stuff above the valve, but I did spin this over with the starter motor and probably blew stuff every which direction. My bet is the valves weren't sealing very well. And you can see the other chambers look like they're in pretty good shape. This is turned around backwards, so the next cylinder that had a little bit of rust at the top was this one. And it really looks like it's in pretty darn good condition overall. So that's my critical one. I'm going to try to put a valve spring compressor on it and see if I can get a look at the seats. Alright, I got the valve spring off of the intake valve seat, off the intake valve, and got the valve open. And I guess I'm just going to say, as you can see from the seat, that it's pretty well corroded. It's lost a fair amount of material. And the valve still obviously seats and fits, as you can see there, but the question will be whether or not you can, whether or not that'll clean up adequately. Back on the spot here. It looks like that was probably hanging open and water was laying in there and making quite a mess. Now I'll go put that spring back and flip us over to the exhaust valve. So here's a look at the exhaust valve and the exhaust valve seat. It looks like it's in much better condition. See if I can get the light on it the right way here. It looks like it's got a little bit of pitting, but not too bad. It's it actually looks like metal as to rust, and I think those seats were hardened in some manner. Whether it had an insert, I think it was probably just spot hardened, probably induction hardened. But it looks like it's in much better shape. So the only question on this head will be whether they can clean up the intake valve adequately, or whether it'll be necessary to get a new head. One of the engine shops I talked to said he had an old Chrysler head from an old muscle car that had rusted enough in the port in the seat that they couldn't clean it up without getting into the water jacket. That one was probably rusted worse than this, but it is a concern trying to find a new head. These should be plentiful, relatively speaking. I think there were a lot of these. These are 416s that are around. So that's all for now.